Every morning before the sun touched the skyline, Maria was already on the 23rd floor. Her hands, calloused from years of scrubbing, moved across the glass doors of the executive offices with quiet precision. She didn't speak much. The others barely noticed her, just the girl with the mop, the one who arrived when the building was still sleeping and left before anyone thought to ask her name. She never expected more. Life had trained her not to. At 22, Maria had lived more lifetimes than most. She grew up in a rented shack behind a welding shop on the outskirts of Cleveland. Her mother had worked herself into a grave before Maria finished middle school. Her father disappeared not long after. Left with nothing but her mother's cleaning rags and a cracked radio, Maria stopped dreaming and started surviving. She didn't hate the office building. If anything, it was the only place where things felt, still, predictable. She'd memorize the grooves in the marble hallway and count the coffee stains under the conference table. She cleaned the same desks, picked up the same discarded paper cups, listened to the same laughter through glass walls that never opened for her. They talked about stock options and vacations in the Maldives like those were as normal as tap water. Maria didn't envy them, but sometimes, when she was scrubbing a perfectly clean surface for the third time, she wondered what it felt like to walk into a room and be noticed. There was one person who did notice her, though, the janitor, old man, quiet, always around. He wore the same navy blue coveralls every day and pushed a squeaky cart with a broken wheel that made it limp like a tired dog. Maria would nod when she passed him in the basement hallway or by the loading dock. Sometimes he'd nod back. That was the extent of it. No names, no stories, just quiet acknowledgement in a world that forgot they existed. But one Thursday morning, everything shifted. Maria had been assigned to clean the executive suite, a fancy corner office with a couch that no one ever used and shelves full of books that had never been opened. She was halfway through dusting when she noticed the janitor standing by the window, staring out at the city skyline. She blinked. She'd never seen him on this floor. "Did you get called up here too?" she asked, half joking, half startled. He turned slowly, a strange look in his eyes, almost like he wasn't supposed to be caught. "No, just checking on something," he said, voice low, calm. Then he walked past her without another word. Maria shrugged it off. Maybe he was lost. Maybe someone had complained about a light bulb. She didn't ask. People like her didn't ask. That night she walked home to her small basement room that smelled like detergent and damp concrete. She reheated a bowl of rice and beans, ate in silence, and stared at the cracked wall where rainwater used to leak in. The silence wasn't new. It was the silence of someone used to being alone, but for the first time in a while, her thoughts lingered on someone else, the janitor. The way he looked out the window, like he owned the city or maybe carried the weight of it, she dismissed the thought. Maybe he was just old and tired. The next day the building was abuzz, an investor visit. The real CEO, the founder himself, was rumored to be coming. Maria didn't care much. She had her list. She had her gloves. She had her mop bucket and 3 empty pens she'd picked off the floor earlier that week. Still, she noticed how the managers walked straighter, how the executives double-checked their collars in the mirrored walls. The whole place reeked of nerves and deodorant. By noon, Maria was on her knees scrubbing a coffee spill outside Conference Room B when she heard the click of polished shoes. She looked up just as a man passed. Tall, older, well-dressed, but not in a flashy way. He walked with quiet assurance, eyes kind, familiar. It was him, the janitor, except it was. He wasn't wearing the blue uniform. No cart, no mop, just a tailored charcoal suit and a simple silver watch that probably cost more than her yearly rent. He glanced at her and for the first time spoke her name. "Maria," he said, almost like a greeting. She froze. "How?" But he had already entered the conference room. The nameplate on the door now read, "Mr. Charles Ellison, founder and CEO." The The same man who cleaned the vents 3 nights ago. The same man who handed her a pair of gloves when hers tore last winter. The man she thought was just another forgotten worker like her. She stood there for a long time after the door closed, mop still in her hand, the floor half wet, her chest tight with disbelief. And for the first time since she'd started this job, someone had said her name. Someone who mattered, someone who had been watching all along. It wasn't the beginning of something yet, but for the first time, it wasn't just the same tired ending. There was something different in the air, a whisper of possibility, a tiny crack in the world she thought was sealed shut, and sometimes a crack is all you need. Maria didn't tell anyone what she saw. Who would believe her? To the world, Charles Ellison was a name, not a face. His public appearances were rare. Most employees hadn't even seen him. People talked about him like a legend who had built the company from a garage and then vanished into boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. But she had seen him, really seen him, not as a tycoon or CEO, but as a quiet old man with a mop and a limp cart, and that truth wouldn't leave her. The next morning she arrived earlier than usual. She polished every surface twice, her mind restless. What did it mean? Why had he worked among them in disguise? Was he testing someone, hiding, or just watching? That afternoon, while waiting for the elevator on the lower level, she heard footsteps behind her. Slow, steady. She didn't have to turn to know it was him. "Maria," he said gently. She turned. His voice was warm, not commanding, not formal, human. "Yes, sir." "No need to call me sir," he said. "I'm Charles." She nodded, unsure what to say. "Walk with me," he said, not an order, an invitation. They walked through the back corridor, past locked rooms and quiet service doors. She noticed things she never had before, how the fluorescent lights flickered above the emergency stairwell, how a thin draft seeped through the fire exit. "You work hard," he said. "I've seen it. It's just cleaning. It's never just anything. You show up before the sun, stay until it's spotless. That tells me more than a resume." Maria looked away, unsure how to receive praise from a man who could buy the whole building 10 times over. They stopped near a storage closet she'd used 100 times. He looked at the scuffed tiles, the rusted doorknob. "This company got too big, too fast," he said. "I stopped knowing what it felt like to be at the bottom. Thought I needed to remember what it costs to build something." Maria listened silently. It felt strange, real, like a confession made to the walls. He glanced at her. "Tell me, what do you want, really want?" No one had asked her that in years, maybe ever. "A room with a window," she said after a pause. "Not in a basement, a place that doesn't smell like bleach." He nodded, not laughing, not even smiling. "That's a good start," he said. Over the next few weeks, something changed. Charles didn't vanish back into suits and silence. He showed up at odd hours, always casual, always alone. Sometimes he'd check the lights. Sometimes he'd ask Maria about her day, not in a forced way, but like someone who truly wanted to know. One day he handed her a small notebook. Inside were blank pages. "Write things down," he said. "Thoughts, dreams, questions, doesn't matter, keep them. Words make things real." She held the notebook close for a long time after he left. There were others who noticed something was different. A few whispered. One junior manager made a snide comment about the cleaning girl spending too much time loitering. Maria pretended not to hear. She kept working, quiet, careful. But her mind had started to shift. She cleaned with more purpose, took notes on how the office functioned, the way schedules were set, how supplies were ordered, who made what decisions. She began to see more than surfaces. She saw systems, structures, people. And with each passing day, the invisible fog that once clouded her future began to thin. One evening, Charles asked her to meet him on the rooftop. It was nearly sunset, the sky painted in orange and gold. He handed her a paper cup with tea. She wasn't sure what to do with her hands. "I started this company with nothing but a borrowed laptop and a desk in a diner," he said. "Everyone sees the towers now. They forget the beginning." She sipped quietly, letting the warmth settle in her chest. "I think you understand beginnings more than most," he added. Maria looked at him, not as a janitor, not even as a CEO, but as a man who knew something about rising from the ground up. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel entirely alone. Hope doesn't come in grand moments. It arrives like this: a quiet walk, a warm tea, a man who sees you when no one else does. And in that moment, standing on a rooftop with city lights waking below them, Maria felt something she hadn't known she needed. A beginning, a first light, something more than survival. Maria didn't change overnight. She still scrubbed the floors, wiped glass, and dumped trash bins as she always had. But something inside her had shifted. The shame that used to wrap around her shoulders like a second skin had begun to loosen. Each small conversation with Charles left a thread of warmth behind, like sunlight slowly melting away old frost. He never gave her money, never promised her a promotion or even hinted at helping her rise. That made his kindness feel different, untainted, without strings. In a world that had only taken from her, Charles asked for nothing. One Friday evening, as the building emptied and lights dimmed floor by floor, Charles appeared beside her with 2 sandwiches wrapped in paper. They sat in the break room, which always felt too cold and too quiet, and ate without much talk. Maria looked up once and caught him watching her, not with pity, but with genuine interest, as if he was listening to a story she hadn't told yet. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, unsure if she meant the food, the conversations, or all of it. He smiled. "I know." That weekend, Maria found herself buying a small second-hand desk lamp and clearing a corner of her tiny room. She opened the notebook he'd given her, wrote her name on the first page, Maria Elena Ruiz. She stared at it for a long time, noticing the way the pen ink bled into the cheap paper. It looked like a signature, like something permanent. She began to write a little each night, notes about the office systems, ideas she had to make the cleaning process more efficient, dreams she didn't dare say aloud. Then, without realizing it, she began to smile more. Not the kind that makes your cheeks hurt, the small, private kind. The kind that bubbles up when the world no longer feels like it's pressing down. One day, Charles asked her to walk with him to the mailroom. The elevators were empty, the carpeted hallway quiet. "There's peace in doing something well," he said as they walked. "Even if no one notices, that's where dignity lives." She nodded. She understood. Sometimes they'd sit on the back steps during her 15-minute break. He'd bring hot tea in paper cups. They'd listen to the distant hum of traffic. He told her stories, not of wealth or success, but of failure. Of the nights he'd slept in his car. Of the times he nearly sold the company to survive. Maria listened like a sponge, not to chase his fortune but to understand his strength. He made survival sound noble, not shameful. Their moments were always brief. No one saw them. There was no spectacle, just 2 people, one younger, one older, finding shelter in conversation. Then one Wednesday morning, Maria found a small envelope tucked inside her locker. No name, just her initials written in simple block letters. Inside was a folded note and a key. The note read, "Room 2B, it has a window." She stared at it for a long time. Room 2B turned out to be a storage room on the 2nd floor that had been cleaned out. It wasn't big. It still smelled faintly of paint, but it had a window, and light poured in like something holy. No one made a big deal of it, no announcement, no explanation. Charles never mentioned it. He simply passed her in the hall that afternoon, nodded once and kept walking. That night Maria sat on the floor of the room with the notebook in her lap, knees to her chest, and cried. Not from sadness, not even from joy. From the quiet, overwhelming feeling that someone had seen her, and cared enough to change something. In the weeks that followed, she started volunteering to stay a little longer, organize cleaning supplies, track inventory better. Not because anyone asked, because she wanted to. And once, when a new cleaning staff member joined, a young boy fresh out of high school, Maria showed him how to mix the floor cleaner properly, how to polish the windows so no streaks remained. He thanked her, surprised by her patience. "I used to do it wrong too," she told him. That night she wrote in her notebook, "You teach best from scars, not trophies." Peace had crept into her life without drama, through cups of tea, shared silences, a key, a window. Maria didn't know what the future held, but for the first time she didn't dread it, and sometimes that is more than enough. Peace doesn't arrive like a parade. It arrives like this, quiet, earned, real. Maria's peace didn't go unnoticed. In a building driven by ambition and silent rivalries, change, especially in the invisible, stirred curiosity. She didn't brag. She didn't speak of the room with the window or the notebooks filling up with observations and sketches. But some people began to watch her more closely, and not all eyes were kind. It started with Miss Amber Langston, Junior VP of Internal Strategy, young, sleek, driven like a freight train. Amber noticed everything and forgot nothing. Her heels clicked with intention, her tone sharp but polished. She had passed Maria 1,000 times before, never a glance, never a word. But now she stopped. One afternoon, Maria was polishing the elevator panels when Amber stepped in, eyes sharp as glass. She didn't press a button. She simply turned and said, "You've been spending a lot of time with Mr. Ellison." Maria straightened slowly, rag still in hand. "Only when he speaks to me." Amber smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You know, ambition is a tricky thing. It makes people see ladders where there are none." Then the doors closed. Maria didn't reply. She didn't even tell Charles, but the knot in her stomach lingered. Later that week, Amber reappeared, but this time with an invitation. "Join me for lunch," she said, appearing beside Maria's cart with 2 lattes in hand. "I think you're someone worth knowing." Maria hesitated. Everything about it felt wrong, but she said yes. They sat in the executive cafe on the 31st floor. Maria had never been there before. Glass walls, hanging lights, food plated like art. Amber talked quickly, confidently, about company trends, about expansion strategies, about how image was everything. "You're clearly smart," she said, stirring her sparkling water with a gold straw. "And people are watching you now. It's time you stopped cleaning floors and started walking them." Maria stared. Amber leaned in, lowering her voice. "I can help you. Internships, training, a real position. But only if you're smart enough to know who's really in charge here." There it was, the hook. "What does that mean?" Maria asked. "It means," Amber said, smiling too sweetly, "that men like Charles Ellison are figureheads. Legacy, nostalgia, but people like me. We're the future." Maria's hands tightened in her lap. "You can stay where you are," Amber continued, sipping her drink, "or you can rise with me." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were forms, application letters already filled, references forged, a contract drafted with Amber's signature. Maria didn't open it. Instead, she pushed the folder back and stood. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she said quietly. Amber laughed. "Loyalty won't get you promoted." "No," Maria said, "but it lets me sleep at night." She left before her hands could shake. That evening she cleaned silently, her thoughts racing. Doubt whispered. Amber had power, resources, a future paved in high ceilings and titles. What did Maria have? A window, a key she never asked for. She went to room 2B and sat by the window as the city darkened. The sounds of traffic below, the hum of the world. And in that quiet she opened her notebook. She wrote, "Integrity is a lonely road, but I'd rather walk it barefoot than ride in someone else's car going the wrong way." Days passed. Then one evening Charles approached her. He said nothing, only handed her a folded paper. It was blank. but on the back a single line in his handwriting. "Some doors test if you know how to walk away." Maria smiled. And in that moment her heart settled again. Temptation had knocked, she had answered, and closed the door herself. It was a Friday morning when everything changed. The office buzzed with its usual energy, meetings scheduled back to back, emails flying, footsteps echoing across the polished floors. Maria moved through the motions, quiet as ever, wiping smudges, replacing bins, watching from the corners where people didn't look. Charles hadn't shown up in a few days. She didn't worry, he came and went unpredictably, but something in her felt unsettled, like a missing note in a melody. That afternoon, an internal announcement came down from the top floor. All staff were to gather in the main conference room at 4 p.m., no exceptions. Maria had never been invited to those, but this time her name was on the list. She arrived early, dressed in her plain uniform, her badge clipped neatly, notebook in her bag. The large conference room filled quickly with people in suits, whispering guesses, board meeting, acquisition, firing spree. Amber arrived last, radiant in a cream blazer. She took a front row seat, smiled at Maria with the coldness of someone confident they'd already won. Then the door opened, and Charles walked in, not in coveralls, not in silence. He wore a tailored navy suit and carried a black folder. He didn't smile, didn't nod. He stood at the head of the room and looked at them all, steady and grave. "Some of you know me as the founder of this company," he began. "Some of you have only seen my name on paper. A few have seen me mop the floors." The room shifted uncomfortably. That wasn't a trick. It was a choice. I wanted to see this place again from the ground up, not from a boardroom. Murmurs, confusion. He continued, "In my time away from formal duties, I've watched how people treat those beneath them, how respect is rationed, how kindness is conditional, and I've made some decisions." He paused, then turned a page. "Effective immediately, a new internal development initiative will launch, prioritizing mentorship and internal growth for support staff. It will be led by someone who understands this building from the floorboards to the top floor." He looked at Maria. Maria Elena Ruiz, silence. Amber turned, disbelief painted across her face. "Maria will begin in a new role, Operations Development Fellow, reporting directly to me." The room seemed to spin. Maria's pulse roared in her ears. She didn't move. She did not ask for this. She did not scheme for it. She simply showed who she was consistently when no one was watching. He stepped aside and motioned to her. Maria stood. Her legs trembled, but she walked to the front. The applause was hesitant, then it grew. Amber clapped last, her hands stiff. After the meeting, Maria stood by the elevators trying to breathe. Charles joined her. He looked at her, kind but firm. "Because you chose integrity over opportunity, and because this place needs to remember what that looks like." She said nothing, but her throat burned. That night she returned to room 2B. It would be her last evening there. She sat by the window and opened her notebook. She wrote, "Sometimes you get tested not to show your weakness, but to reveal your strength." Down the hall someone vacuumed, keys jingled, the world moved on. But inside Maria something had shifted forever. She hadn't just passed a test, she had changed the rules. Maria didn't move into a corner office. Her new workspace was modest, just a desk beside a window on the operations floor, a rolling chair that creaked when she leaned back, and a single potted plant she brought from home. But it was hers. No mop bucket, no checklist pinned to the wall, just space, air, and a future she hadn't dared to imagine. The first few days were disorienting. Emails with subject lines she didn't understand. Meetings where acronyms flew like darts. People eyed her with curiosity, some with resentment. She felt like a visitor in someone else's world. But Charles checked in daily, not with instructions but with presence. "Ask questions," he told her, But don't ever pretend to know more than you do. That's where real leadership begins." So she asked, she listened. She took notes like her life depended on it. She shadowed department heads, studied company charts at night, watched old strategy videos online. Slowly, things began to make sense. And something else happened. One morning, she passed by the cleaning staff closet. A new girl, barely 19, was struggling to carry a supply bin. Maria stopped, helped her lift it, and walked with her to the utility room. Maria smiled. "Yes, but I'm still learning just like you." That afternoon, she proposed her first initiative, a cross-training program to offer part-time operations courses to support staff, cleaners, mailroom workers, receptionists. She expected hesitation. Instead, Charles approved it on the spot. "You're not just changing your story," he said. "You're rewriting others too." The months passed quietly, but something in the company's culture began to shift. The invisible started to matter. Janitors were greeted by name. Interns were invited to planning sessions. Even Amber, though still sharp as ever, kept her distance now, with eyes that flickered, not with condescension, but with caution. One evening, after a long day, Charles invited Maria to the rooftop again. The city shimmered beneath them. They stood in silence for a while. "Letting them know who you were, taking the mask off." He looked out over the lights, then shook his head slowly. "Not for a second. I'd wear 100 uniforms to see one life step into its worth." Maria didn't speak. The wind tugged at her sleeves. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For seeing me when no one else did." Charles turned, his voice soft. "You made yourself seen, Maria. I just didn't look away." A week later, Maria gave her resignation. Not from the company, but from the program. Her fellowship had ended, and instead of applying for a promotion, she chose something unexpected. "I want to start something new," she told Charles. "Not just within these walls, something wider, deeper, a platform to help others rise." He nodded. "Then let me help you build it." She left quietly that spring. No press release, no farewell party, just a letter on Charles's desk, her notebook in his hand, and a promise to return one day, not as a mentee, but as a partner. Years later, a new initiative launched across the city, training centers for underrepresented youth, transitioning workers, and women re-entering the workforce. At the bottom of each welcome packet, a quote: "Kindness is the seed, dignity is the root, rise from the ground and grow. MER." And those who knew exactly who those initials belonged to. Maria Elena Ruiz didn't just clean offices, she opened doors and walked through them, bravely, humbly, fully seen.